welcome to An Accountable Catholic on Carolina Catholic Radio. Thanks for joining in tonight, and for all the listeners, you will not be disappointed in this show. It's going to be a lot of fun. I am bringing on with me tonight a great guest, a gentleman named Nick Engstrom from down in Dallas, and I'll let him tell his story, but he is a college student with a lot to say about what's happening on college campuses, and that's the discussion point for tonight's show is helping everyone understand, especially parents and Christian parents and Catholic parents, sending your students out into the big world of going to the university or college of their choice. There's a lot of challenges out there with what's being taught, and so Nick has a great story to share. So welcome, Nick. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited.
So tell the audience a little bit introduce yourself, say where you're from maybe, and without going into your full story yet, just kind of give a little bit of background first.
Yeah, so I'm a junior here at SMU in Dallas, Texas now, but I originally started my undergraduate education at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. I started there in 2018. I was born and raised in Swampscott, Massachusetts. So I'm a New England boy and a New England conservative in the traditional sense. And I was really excited for college, and I picked Trinity as my first place school. If you're familiar with that, Tucker Carlson went there, Jesse Waters, George Will. I mean, it was really known as this school that was sort of the alternative liberal arts education for center-right students. And I got there, and I did 2 years there, and I was misled, I think, to say the least.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into that story for sure. So just so, our listeners here at Carolina Catholic don't think, boy, Lisa, you're getting into political topics. It really is not about politics, right? I mean, what we're trying to say is, yes, you're a conservative student and you're going to share your story, but the bigger concern is about the division in America today, right? And accountability, right? Because I wrote a book about being accountable, and I know you know about it. And what I'm trying to share, I guess, with parents tonight and with young students that are getting ready to go to college is, guess what? This is not like what it was years ago when we were in college, for sure. And I really just want to get that message out, because I think it's the opposite of accountability as to what's happening on our campuses today. So why don't you share kind of what happened at Trinity in the context of, really not being accountable? I mean, clearly your story tells me that we have a lot of stuff going on at campus that doesn't have people standing up being accountable for what we believe in our country, from our Constitution to our Christian beliefs.
Exactly. And as you sort of mentioned there first, how this really isn't political, especially like as I start to tell the story, it's entirely academic, right? Sort of the issues at play here were entirely based off of, sort of my view and sort of the institution's view of, academics and history in a lot of ways. Right. And I think that that's important, right? We've reached a point in our history, in our culture, where history and, knowledge has become political.
Right.
And that's dangerous.
Right. And that's
fact, sort of.
Right. In fact, what we know to be fact, like, so you were taught as a young man by your parents, hey, here's what we believe, and here's what, we want you raised and understanding what the truth is. And then you kind of got to college, and it sounds like learned a really some major life lessons pretty quick.
Exactly. So, so the sort of the summary of the story, and what basically happened was freshman year, I joined this club called the Churchill Club. It was sort of this off branch of the Churchill Institute, which was founded at Trinity in around 2016 by one of my political science professors. Yep. The institution organization had a really simple message: study and preserve Western civilization and thought. And it's the idea, right, that when you walk into a college campus, you're being taught lots of different things that, people 15, 20 years weren't being taught, right, which is fine. But we're not being taught some of those essential foundation classes. And sort of, the backbone that Western civilization, right, has given us these luxuries and these freedoms that we have now. So we wanted to basically make the club approved by the Student Government Association,
Right.
which is really just, kind of a rubber stamp process in order for us to bring speakers to campus and sort of just engage more intellectually with Western civilization. What happened is that when we went to go get approval, I was greeted by over 60 protesters at this event.
Wow.
Where I started being called the white supremacist.
Oh, geez.
And and I go into this, and what happened was, the view that Western civilization is a code for white supremacy and the West is white. So immediately I'm just hit with just this real alternative view of the world, right? I've never really viewed, well, one, I just never associated the West with white. It doesn't really make any sense.
Right.
Their ideas, their values.
I mean, we're a country of immigrants, right? I mean, we were founded on Christianity and immigrants.
Right.
Right.
So basically, right, in this moment, our free speech and basically our autonomy to learn was being shut down. Like, I was told that I was not allowed to study John Locke because he was a slave owner. And I was like, that's inaccurate. He wasn't a slave owner. And another thing was, it was people felt uncomfortable that we were going to read books on Western philosophy. So like, people were uncomfortable that we were going to read Plato's Republic. They didn't feel safe. And it just was like a very sort of mind-blowing experience. But, sort of where things ramped up from there was about 2 months into this process, and we were subjugated to town halls where we had to go listen to, just people sort of belittle our club and sort of our beliefs. Where things took a turn and where things got nasty, and this is sort of where the accountability comes into play, was one day, sort of at the end of these town halls and right before the Student Government Association votes to, approve or deny us, students took our faces. They stalked our social media accounts. They stalked my Facebook, and they stalked our other members' Facebooks, and they took our profile pics and they put them on posters. And they said the new racism is every bit as ugly as the old, and plastered them all around campus.
Unbelievable. And here you are, a freshman, right? 18 years
Yeah,
old.
I'm a freshman.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And so this process is insane. So we, me and the club president, because I wasn't even, the president, right? I'm a freshman. I went to go fill in for her at this meeting because she had a work commitment. And so then that's how I sort of ended up being the scapegoat of this.
Oh, geez.
So we stormed into the president's office, President Joanne Burger-Sweeney, and she, did the usual of just, this is unacceptable. We believe in all this, free speech and whatnot. So they do an investigation. They try to figure out, who does it. They identified 4 individuals that did the flyering. They wouldn't tell us who they were, any of the information about them, nothing at all. The summer goes by. Because they were investigating, because, I thought that some sort of conclusion was going to come, I decided to stay for second year at Trinity. And in the fall, I approached them. I'm like, can you please tell me, sort of the punishment that took place, what happened?
Like, where are we? Where's the repercussions? Yeah.
Yeah, and Trinity said that they were punished and refused to tell me. I was then sort of told off the record by a few campus police officers that I sort of got to know from this process that they never received punishment, that they were essentially martyrs, and that, some, professors sort of helped sort of, motivate them to do something like this. And they called it political art.
Where are we going? But I tell you, I'm sure these statistics, but in October of 2020, I guess a huge survey was done, over 20,000 students, 55 campuses. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of reading the notes to make sure I have the right statistics, but 50% of the students identified as liberal, 25% of more conservative nature, and 25% moderate. Again, not so much today talking only about this conservative versus moderate versus liberal. The biggest challenge we're facing, I have no problem with be what you want to be, stand up for what you believe. What I'm concerned with as a Christian and as a person who stands for accountability in our country, and as a parent, Nick, to be quite frank, is I wouldn't want to be sending my 18-year-old off to a college that I thought, hey, at least everybody's going to get a free shot at discussing what they want to discuss, bringing up what they want to discuss, and be truthful, right? And not instead be, put through what you were put through. And again, and then they turn around and ask the teachers, 71% of all the professors said we are liberal or very liberal, and 6% of the teachers would say they're conservative. I mean, that is so far different from when I graduated back down at SMU in 1986. I mean, so in 40 years, you might say, well, that's a long time. We're changing the entire, everything we believe in for college campuses, which is supposed to be a bastion of ability to have free speech, right?
Yeah. I mean, essentially, I was told a lie, right? I get to Trinity, paying, thousands of dollars to get a liberal arts education.
Right.
And I get there and I'm told that I can't study what I want to study.
Right.
I am then harassed for wanting to study what I want to study.
Right.
And then we have people sort of in power structures there in the faculty and the administration that are enabling and motivating these students to sort of, to do this harassment and to sort of do this lying.
To do things that we know are wrong. We know those are wrong. Right.
And getting to sort of the culture, the culture of what is being produced on a college campus is not representative of our nation. And that's really where this issue stems from. You're going to a college, and again, this isn't necessarily political because it's just how you think. It's how you're sort of rationalizing beliefs and sort of your thoughts. They're teaching us how to do things so differently that have never been done before that just doesn't even make sense. Right. And that's where we're at. And the issue is that colleges have never been held accountable. And this is really, in my opinion, what 60 years of sort of unchecked higher education looks like. And I think, we're reaching a point too, because we got to just sort of view, I think there's another statistic out there. 70% of high school graduates at least start college. They don't all graduate, but at least 70% of people that graduate from high school in America will attend college for, at least a few weeks or a semester or whatnot.
Yes.
And we need to sort of address this problem because 70% of our, future generations are getting this disservice from faculty and from the administration. Right. And that's a real problem that we really need to work out. And it, like you said, it's all going to come down to accountability.
Right. Yeah, because when you go on and then you go on in these surveys, and anybody can look them up, and you see that over half of the students say they're in fear because they're not going to get the right grade. They're not. I mean, then that is unaccountable, and that is not accountability. I mean, it's not fair, and it's not right. It's not just, and that's opposite of what America stands for.
Right.
I mean, and it is.
I mean, so, I just think it's, and this is, and I talked about this before, and it's a really interesting point that I think. So again, most of the people that were sort of protesting me were Black and brown students, and some sort of white people with a lot of guilt, right? And these individuals, have been, and I mean, you look at history, right? They've been barred from a lot of higher education, right? It hasn't been until recently, probably the 1990s and so on, that, Black and brown students have been able to really go to higher education schools and sort of study the things that this club was doing, right? Sort of really embracing in sort of this Western tradition, really sort of understanding, right, the backbone to a democracy, to a republic, to sort of natural rights and sort of Christian values. So now, right, these students finally get there. They're finally about to sort of embrace in sort of this liberal arts education. And they're essentially as denied as I am. Because now, they finally get to this point, they're finally enriching themselves in sort of what, people have sort of been doing for generations. And now they're getting this critical race theory sort of social, everything's a social construct view of the world. And I think it's a real disservice to these communities as well.
Well, and as a Catholic, being that we're on a Carolina Catholic and it's an accountable Catholic, but being a Christian, right? And at SMU, the reason I chose the school is because it's Methodist based. So the challenge I have too, with everything that's happening to you, everything we're seeing happening on campuses, is squashing of free speech. The challenge I really have as well is it's not God's truth anymore either. I mean, the
Mhm.
kind of the message seems to be, but correct me if I'm wrong in your experience or what you're hearing from your friends in other colleges,
Mhm.
the message isn't, gee, there really is one truth because we believe in God. I'll never forget, even back when I was there, and I thought that was terrible. I mean, it pales in comparison to what you're going through.
Mhm.
They wanted to teach and ensure that we had sex education. The second we arrived in school, we were supposed to understand
Mhm.
everything about, sex education. And my argument was, wait a minute, that's not what God's asked us to do.
Mhm.
Here I am, a, freshman girl. I am not interested in learning all the different ways to sin. Like that's not,
Mhm.
that's not
Yeah.
what I showed up to learn at school. And so I had to go to the dean, and I'll never forget back then, and basically say, because it was mandatory. Everybody mandatory had to go
Mhm.
through this class. I said, I'm not going to go through a class to have you tell me, here's all the different things I'm supposed to do. That is sin when we're at a Christian university. I'm really confused
Mhm.
here. And
Yeah.
and then finally I got out of it. But why is it that I have to, do the opposite? Why are we arguing that abstinence wasn't the right thing, right? And why are we
Mhm.
arguing, that everything what's happening to you is very unchristian-like, it's very
Mhm.
unaccountable, and it seems to be the standard in the majority of our college campuses today.
Mhm. Right, and that sort of gets to the point, and what we're seeing now. And now it's a bit more political now. And I think back in the day it was more sort of probably religious focused in some of those issues. But
Right.
it's just like not presenting both sides.
Right.
And I think that that's really important. In your case, right? If I understand. If students at SMU want to take a sexual education class, right, they have that right. But if you want to also learn about sort of the positive religious aspects of being absence, right?
Right.
Um, you should also have that right and have that ability. And I think,
Exactly. Yeah.
and now we see it in higher ed. Like, if you want to take classes that sort of go into, non-Christian beliefs, that's fine. But we have to supplement that as well. And I think that's where we're at, and that's, I think, the biggest issue, and that's why all of these students are going left, because they think that this is the only option. They think that this
Right.
is the only way to do it. They're not being presented with both sides, because what would and I'm not saying that conservative thought is the right thought, but what I am saying is that when you have students that went to school in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when they were presented with both sides, more
Yep.
than likely they picked the conservative view. And I think
Right.
that that's a primary reason sort of why that was eroded out.
Well, and to your point on all these surveys too, we know that the nation identifies, right? 31% of us identify as conservatives, yet only 20 something percent are left on college campuses. That doesn't make any sense. And that's happening because many of us as parents are sending our students away. I mean, I talk to parents all the time now, especially on my book tours and stuff, that say,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, I have 3 kids and they were all, they all had our beliefs when they left here, which were, they're going to Catholic church or whatever it might be. And they believe in this. And then 3 years after going to college, they come back their senior year, or whatever. They're a totally different beliefs than what we ever taught them. And that's sad. We did not have that situation when I was a kid growing up. I mean, my parents didn't have any of that fear. And I think as parents today, that is a huge situation. I mean, I just don't think parents realize how challenging, I guess, it's gotten on campus.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, I don't necessarily blame the kids, because if you sort of go through this process, I mean, I was raised, I wasn't necessarily raised to be conservative, but I was raised in a family that valued hard work, that valued the American dream, that had Christian values. I grew up Congregationalist in the North Shore of Massachusetts. And there were a lot of liberals up there, and I.
But it's a very diverse state,
right?
Like many
Yeah,
states.
very
I mean, I grew up in California. We're very diverse,
right? And you take a student who was raised with sort of conservative values that leans right. You send them to a school, and if all their friends surrounding them are liberal, right? If all their professors are liberal, if the administration is liberal, if everything they just see around them, right? If they're going to school in a city, most college towns are liberal, you're going to start to think that how you were raised and how you were grown up was wrong. Even and that's why, like, parents, don't necessarily blame yourself for a lot of this, because what it is that if you are a student and you're put into a situation where all you see is this one idea and this one view from everyone around you, you're going to start to have self-doubts about your beliefs. And I think that's normal. And that's the issue, is the fact that there's such a high concentration of this one singular idea, this one singular viewpoint. Right. And that's why people that, go in with sort of real strong conservative backing walk out not having that backing anymore, because they basically got assimilated.
Right, but you're trying to get an education. So, gee, where do we go? All right, well, we're going to take a quick break here, and we'll come right back, and Nick will talk with me on the other side of the break, and we'll wrap up on what we can do to try to offset this lack of education, or the right kind of education, I think, on our campuses. We'll be right back.
Carolina Catholic Radio is excited to announce an alliance with Lisa Feely, author of An Accountable American. Her new book offers a blueprint to every person who wants to embrace how to be accountable. Learn how positively to impact your life and the lives of anyone around you. If you want to learn how to achieve enlightenment, peace, and prosperity, this is a great start. Now back to An Accountable Catholic Radio show.
Hi, Lisa Feely here, back from the break, and joining me is Nick Engstrom, talking about what we can do to be more accountable on college campuses across the country, because millions of students go to college campuses. And I think as parents, and as Christian parents, as parents who believe in accountability, we want to prepare our students best. And for those of you that are out there that are 16, 17, 18, listening to the show or watching the show, Nick has done a great job kind of trying to say, here's what's going on. He's told his story. So Nick, one of the things I'm going to start with here that I was just, again, shocked, and maybe I shouldn't be, you're probably not shocked. Two, I looked up college university orientation programs across the country, and a couple that came to, right off the bat just was like, oh, are you kidding me? We're doing this. Stay healthy, stay woke, college freshman orientation, understanding your white privilege. That's freshman orientation, mandatory orientation programs. Why are we having programs like this? This is sad. It really is sad.
I'll actually tell you. So one of my first days at Trinity, at my orientation, we were given it was like a shopping list, checklist of all the privileges. And you had to go and check which privileges you have. And by the time I was done with it, I the only privilege that I didn't have, I was raised by a single mom, so I had that one. And then you were ranking the number. So, are you white? Are you straight? Are you obese? Are you, what's your religion? Are you Christian? Are you Jewish? Or are you Muslim? And basically, from that moment, you're just causing division, right? You're literally sorting. You're sorting people based off of their, privileges, and then you're ranking them using a numerical score of how oppressed certain people are. I mean, what is that? How is that benefiting anyone?
That's exactly my point. I make that point in my book when people say, well, you need to discuss this. No, I don't, because I think we're starting off the wrong way. I think we're starting with divisiveness. In other words, if you and I were colleagues, when you get out and you come into the workplace and you write a paper, write information or a blog, and I'm supposed to, I'm the marketing person, so I'm going to run your blog. And I go into you and say, hey, Nick, you're really stupid and I hate your blog. How open are you going to be, this is not the way that we should do this. And that's what this whole conversation's about, is 50% of the country wanting to be concerned about something that happened 60, 70 years ago, and forever we're going to have to do this, have this argument or divisiveness. And the other 50% are saying it doesn't exist. So stop having this discussion. So how do you get around that? Or what is your thoughts on how you've had to survive? And I'm hoping my alma mater, SMU, has been a little bit better.
No, yeah, SMU's definitely been a lot better. It's one of the last few places, and it's actually, one of the things that I'm nervous about is that, there's a few great schools left, and we really got to hold the line. I think this makes me think of Ron DeSantis's opening speech at CPAC. I don't know if any of your listeners saw that, but he ended his speech by saying, when you're under pressure, when we're under pressure, you got to hold the line. And I think right now, academically, professionally, politically, it is our duty to hold the line. And I don't know how long we have to do it for, but that is by far our goal right now. And I think that I think it's really a Christian goal, is sort of defending our lifestyles and our beliefs for God. I think that that's really important, and that's what we really need to do right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to hold the line on being what this country was meant to be. I mean, God created our earth, but he gave us America. We ended up with a wonderful country, with a wonderful constitution. And we're all in this together, and we were all made in his image. And, we all just need to do live out our purpose.
And this is sort of my advice to anyone and everyone. And it's actually really helped me over the past year, because I definitely went into a dark place after all this stuff happened to me. My freshman year, I'm 18 years old. I'm now 21. Yeah. I'm now 21 on sort of the other side of being harassed and bullied for 2 years. And what I've learned from it is you got to speak your mind. There's a small population that controls the narrative, and that's the issue. And I really hate to see apathetic Christians and apathetic conservatives just sitting on the sidelines, knowing what's happening is wrong, seeing what's going on they disagree with, and just not doing anything about it. Because that's how we continue, and it's why we are where we are today. And if we started being vocal and we started showing numbers, because there's a lot of us out there, there's a lot more Christians out there than we know of. There's a lot more conservatives out there than we know of. I mean, just look at recent elections and polls and sort of service numbers and we have, if we sort of start being vocal, we start really just standing our ground and holding that line, I think a lot of things will change. They'll have to change. You know?
Yes. And I love how I heard you on another show, and one thing you said, which I completely agree, and I actually just did a show on it as well, is we have to, as Christians and conservatives, have our money. Let's walk the walk, talk the talk, right? Let's put our money where our mouth is. Yeah. And we have a huge, as Christians, there are millions and millions and millions of us in this country. And if we would really, truly, like you say, don't get apathetic. People like to say, oh, well, Lisa, the world's not that clear, right? Everything is difficult or more complex. No, it really is that clear, because God had something called the 10 Commandments. It's pretty clear. And while he has a lot of mercy, there's only one place we really are all trying to get to. And believe me, there's another place you don't want to go. and if you don't follow, what he's asked us to do, it's really easy. He's not saying, gee, there's 25 different choices in between here where everybody can still feel good. That's not the way it works. And there are moral issues in this country that we're faced with. What happened to you was not right. No one would say it's right. What happened to some of the stuff we saw over the summer, you and I both agree, hey, that wasn't right. There are some bad people out there, right? There are bad things going on, but that does not mean that there is not much more good. And like you said, there's a small percentage of our population that are really trying to rule the rest of us. And we can't stand by. You have to be accountable. You have to follow God's word, I feel. And then that's what will get us back to being the great country we once were. We're a great country, but we are very divided right now. It's not healthy to have these messages where it's all one-sided and stuff that's happening to you and many Christian students across the country and conservative students. It's not right. College is meant to be a bastion of both sides, right? That's why you go to get an education is to learn. Yeah. So, well, good. Well, let's wrap up. Do me a favor. What 3 pieces of advice would you give parents today that have 15, 16, 17-year-olds at home trying to decide which college do we really want to go to, and spend a lot of money? As you know, college is not cheap these days. Do you have just 3 things you would tell some parents of what to consider?
Yeah. So I think, and first off too, like I understand sort of the gravity of dealing with all of this during this ongoing pandemic.
Yes.
I mean, kids are at home doing remote, and there's a lot of things up in the air. And I know that that's definitely going to play a factor in. And I'll just sort of note that, I transferred schools during this whole time in this process. So it is possible. So just sort of as some, hopefully that gives some people some comfort that you can make a change there. But yeah, the first thing that I'd say is, just do some research. They're never going to really show you the true school on the tour. Most of the college tours are fabricated. I actually recommend not doing a college tour, looking back at it and just sort of wandering the campus on your own and checking it out and sort of getting a tour of the buildings. But in terms of the actual spiel that they give you, 95% of it just isn't true. And that's an area of accountability that definitely needs to be held up. The other is professors. And there are some very good liberal professors out there that are actually open-minded and that can sort of show things. And it's pretty easy to discover how a professor kind of thinks and teaches by just kind of looking at a few basic things. And a lot of it is public online. You can find CVs on sort of faculty directories. You can find course syllabi, things like that. And I just think sort of immersing yourself in sort of that sort of academic aspect is going to be a lot easier. The other thing is, sort of look at the students, are these students that are you going to want them to come home to your house at 6 months? I think that's an important thing because those are going to be the people that are going to influence your child the most. It's not going to be professors. It's not going to be admin. It's going to be who they're around. We've seen.
So go visit some dorm rooms or go hang out on campus.
But and it's increasingly, especially with my generation, that we've just become just way more apathetic and just kind of lazy. And I think like that's I hate to say it, but it's true. And I think really sort of looking at are these kids happy? Do they look happy? Like when you're on a tour and you're looking at students, do they look happy? Because that's going to be a really big indicator to your child's happiness and sort of their successes at college. I sort of wished I paid more attention to sort of the vibes and that Trinity students had. And it was so interesting. My first day here in SMU, it's like 100 degrees out, sun was shining. Everyone was walking around smiling, laughing, and waving. And I just was like, man, I knew I made the right choice transferring. So that's huge.
We do have a pretty campus.
One of the prettiest of all times. The third is, I really think, trust your gut, right? You've been able to somehow, and like I'll never know how parents do it. You've managed to do this for at least 18 years, and you've really didn't have any training prior to this, right?
No, you guys didn't come with any books, I assure you.
Right. If you've made it this far, right, I think you have a pretty good sort of understanding of yourself and of your child, and probably of the world. And I think really trust your gut, really sort of figure that out. And I think, if you don't feel that it's right, if you don't have that feeling, talk to your kid about it. Now, obviously, there's always that mantra of like, oh, if you're so anti it, you'll push them towards it. And I don't know if that's 100% true, but, I think it's just a balance. And I think, letting your child drive the decision, but also really be there to guide them, I think is probably the best thing that we could do right now.
Terrific. And then I'll add one from the parent side of the fence. Pray, and pray even harder. Because we just hope if it does go wrong, in our book we say wrong, but I've talked to a lot of parents and they'll say, boy, we just couldn't have predicted all this stuff. And I'm sure your parents nowhere near predicted what happened to you.
Nowhere.
And we just have to pray that by the time you guys are all out and you're in your careers, that hopefully you come to see that there is really only one truth. And, in order to be, a good, accountable American, which is what my book is called, just, consider all sides, right? Understand, research, learn the facts. Do not just buy in to anything anybody is telling you. Because we call that and I'll end with this, it really was an indoctrination. I think a lot of parents feel they weren't planning, and people say, oh, that's a really negative word, Lisa. And I say, you know what? But it's a factual word. And what indoctrination means, and I know you know this, Nick, is you show up somewhere and someone just wants you only believing this is the truth. And it's not the truth, and it's not critical thinking, and it's not giving you objectivity or both sides. It's truly indoctrinating you only into this is the only answer. And that's not what America's made of. I mean, we're always about debate and free speech, right? And freedom of religion,
Right.
and, you know, all of our other freedoms. And like you said, Western civilization is the best in the world. I mean, I've lived, you know, all over the world and lived in many states, and, you know, we are the best still. I mean, we have a great country, and the Western civilization is the way to go, in my opinion. So, well, thank you so much for joining me on our show tonight. And I wish you the best at SMU and on with your life as well. And I look forward to having you on a future show.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was a great experience, and I enjoyed it.
Great. Well, listen, end with, do me a favor, and if you have your website up for your club that you're responsible, do you have that? Do you know your website address? You want to share that with our audience so they can come and learn a little bit more about the club you founded too?
Yeah, definitely. Let me pull it up right here. So I recently founded a club at SMU. It's called the 26 Club. And the club is essentially designed to fundamentally understand where conservatism and which type of conservatism plays the role in the 21st century. Because we have a lot of new problems that we never had before that sort of some of these old school ways might not be able to fix. And the club's website, it's called, it's just www.26 written out, so 20-6.com. And it'll be up and running hopefully within the next few days. And, you know, please check it out and please donate if you have time. The whole point of this club is to really engage students at SMU and sort of keep these conservative schools conservative. We really sort of want to build into the foundation of SMU and really have a influential role in the coming years of sort of how SMU does its policy with sort of academics, with its culture, with its social priorities. And we really think that this is going to be the best way to get that stuff done.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nick, and good night, everyone. I hope you come back for next Thursday night show at An Accountable Catholic here on Carolina Catholic Radio. This is Lisa Feely, your host. We'll see you next week.